What do you see when you imagine the future? When we picture what's to come, we often think of innovations that take us to new heights. Some of them are already here, and every day, thousands more make the jump from our imagination into reality. Nowhere is this more evident than here in Japan. Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies are fundamentally transforming the way we do things. All this is happening so fast, and we must do more than just keep up. These emerging technologies open up boundless possibilities of what our future could look like. Technology is not a simple solution to our problems. It poses questions that we need to answer and guidelines we need to write together. That's why we're all here. A global event hosted by Japan that brings together the world's leading voices across disciplines and geographies. How technology will shape our tomorrow depends on the choices we make today. And that starts now.
Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Michael Casey. I'm the Chief Content Officer at CoinDesk, and I'm very, very happy to be moderating this panel for you today. It's really going to be a fascinating topic covering a rich area of interest, one that is quite broad in its potential. The title is The Arrival of the Token Economy from Art to Real Estate. The session is hosted by the Forum's Affiliate Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in the UAE. That centre was the first affiliate centre to join the C4IR network and has most recently been leading the work to develop and test the tokenization of digital assets, which is the topic today. So it's as I said, we have a great panel, a wide range of perspectives. I think you'll find that there's different angles on the token economy and the power of tokenization as a tool for all of these fourth industrial revolution concepts. First of all, Minister Abdullah bin Tuq Al-Mari, who is the Minister of Economy of the United Arab Emirates. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us. And we have Harry Yeff, who is an artist and director of the new media artist and director, artist and director of Reaps 100 Studios and the co-founder of This and That. And Sheila Warren, head of blockchain and data policy at the World Economic Forum. And I'm going to make a little plug here. She's also my co-host of the Money Reimagined podcast that you can all catch once a week on Fridays. So thank you all very, very much for being here. I'm really excited about this. There's so much happening in this particular space. People are probably out there hearing about this NFT phenomenon, which is a new form of token that is catching the art world by excitement, but there's also a lot of other stuff happening in real estate and everything else in that. And then there's just this broader idea about the world of tokens, how they fit into the economy, and so forth. So without further ado, Minister Abdullah bin Tuq Al-Mari, please, if you don't mind, talk to us about why the UAE is so interested in this space and why you've taken the initiatives you have to develop a strategy around tokens and tokenization.
Thank you, Michael. And before I start, I just want to say a few words for the World Economic Forum, and a pleasure to be part as well of the Global Technology Governance Summit, and to discuss the ways of development of emerging technologies through the public-private collaboration. I would like to as well thank the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution and the affiliates that works in many governments around the world, including the UAE. And today's session is taking place in a new era of humanity, which digitalization and information technology are the pivotal parts for everyone's life. We see this at a small scale, the tools we use to communicate, but more recently at a larger scale where digital business models are being adopted and successfully implemented in our economy. So going back, Michael, I think to the question is why is UAE looking to tokenization, investment, as well as the funding? Our priority is supporting inclusive economy and technology growth with the goal of doubling up the economy in the next decade. Today, the UAE's economy is about 1.5 trillion dirhams, and we want to double that to 3 trillion dirhams in the next 10 years, which means that we need to grow at a 6 to 7% GDP growth annually. To reach this goal of scale of technology advancement is important and more efficient and diverse means of capital allocation. In our digital age, tokenization complements the information-based technology as a decentralized way of capital allocation. Therefore, looking at tokenization of digital assets and digital financial instrument that marries the digital economy for a financial technology, that's a formula by itself. So when you look at that, it's a bit complicated at first glance, but it's important to understand that this is something that is aligned with the UAE's vision of encompassing a digital economy. So tokenization has 3 main functions: facilitating access to capital for issuers, facilitating access to investments for investors, and fractionalizations of assets. Given that numerous entities in the UAE, which play a pivotal role in the economy, have limited access to diverse means of funding, so therefore tokenization will have a key role, including those entities in financial markets, opening doors to investors who want to be in partnership with them. We at the Ministry of Economy have been studying together with the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution in the UAE and Dubai International Financial Center and the Dubai Financial Service Authority, the deployment of a digital asset as an alternative source of financing for SMEs post-COVID recovery. Therefore, tokenization of SME debt and equity financing could provide investor exposure to SMEs as an asset class, while advancing efficiency, transparency, and liquidity. Private and smaller range investors as well, who traditionally might face challenges in investing in SMEs, will be able to provide funding in exchange for tokens. Other as well, issued tokens by SMEs and other entities can be listed and traded on emerging digital asset exchanges, such as trading securities or traditional exchanges. Pioneering the regional crypto exchange is in our agenda, and tokens issued by private entities will have implicit roles to play in transforming the UAE economy and its dynamics. Namely, privately issued tokens can act as a store of value by linking the value of tokenomics of the currencies to the company's future cash flows. And the tokens can act as a medium exchange of allowing holders to use tokens to pay for company services while maintaining private database of consumer behavior. We have all that in writing, and we have all that in happening. And therefore, we have as well the first tokenization of assets regulation open for open consultancy, which ended a couple of months ago. We're putting the regulation now into gear, and we're ready and more fit to open our economy for tokenization.
Fantastic. Thank you for that summary there. That's it sort of, I think, lays out the broader discussion about the economic opportunities that arise from the tokenization of assets. You know, Harry F., the conversation around that, you know, is one that's been going for a while. We've had the ICO boom back in 2017, and the minister talked about tokenization and sort of token economics as being a key factor. That was the big conversation right there. I don't think people foresaw, though, as that was happening and that bubble kind of rose and fell, that in fact, this other big use case would emerge and sort of hit the world by storm, and that is NFT, non-fungible tokens, as it pertains at least to the art world, where we've seen some spectacular deals being made and a lot of interesting speculation. Why does that matter? Is this just some bubble? You know, who cares about Beeple? Why does Beeple's NFT matter? You know, give us the perspective of why this is important from an artist's perspective, and then we'll see if we can bring that back a little later to the economic stuff that the minister was talking about.
Yeah, I can't comment specifically on Beeple's work mattering, but I can say that I think artists deserve credit for innovation. For a long time, artists have been pushing this space, and there's been a really exciting kind of purpose for that, because artists simultaneously are at the tip of the arrow for innovation. They're not only testing sort of the capabilities of NFTs, they're also making these ideas extremely accessible. And if you look at projects like CryptoPunks and CryptoKitties, on the face of it, they seem quite strange. And the programmability of an NFT, the fact that you're able to create a token and you're allowed to have crafting, you can have redeeming, randomization. Artists have been testing this technology for some time. And if you're able to make these ideas accessible, I think one of the reasons this conversation happening now is because of artists. We have to make sure that we're taking all the artworks as examples, and the art is the face of the token. And the technology is the key part. And we can use the arts, we can use experience, we can use these incredible, colorful, wonderful ways of using the technology to raise awareness. And there are many, many very important lessons in the NFT creations, in the art space, that can be applied to all uses of this technology. So you have to give credit to the artists for pushing these technologies forward, and making sure that it's understood that narrative is a huge part of the success of these technologies, because many people still do not understand how this works. And it's our job as the governors of narrative to make sure that that isn't the case, that misinformation does not perpetuate, and that we do understand what these tools actually do.
Right. So this role almost of the artist is the kind of connector, the storyteller in a way that brings us together and makes this sort of stuff relevant. So I think this is, again, though, there's a bridge needed here, Sheila, and maybe you can play that role since you've taken an interest in all of this. I know this from the work together. How does it all come together? I mean, where are you seeing things going between this very deliberate strategy that, say, the UAE is approaching to an economic solution around tokenization, and this sort of wild, artistic, creative, cultural endeavors that are happening in that space? How does this all come together in a fourth industrial revolution economic solution? Sorry, that's a big overarching question, but I know you're capable of answering it.
Yeah. Well, I think that to Harry's point, I think it is artists who are paving the way here and really bringing NFTs to the broader cultural awareness. But to the minister's point, I think there are so many uses for this particular form of the technology that we're really just starting to explore. So if there's a tip of the iceberg, I think that the artists, the basketball players, are really the athletes, the creators are really leading the way. What I find most fascinating, exciting about the creator economy, about NFTs as a general matter, is how we're going to be able to democratize ownership of assets. So one thing we talk about a lot at the forum, we have a whole initiative called Data for Common Purpose, and that's focusing on how can we more equitably allocate the risk and reward of data across a broader set of stakeholders. NFTs give us an opportunity to think about that. The minister mentioned briefly fractionalized ownership. Now this makes less sense in the art world, although to others it makes perfect sense, depends on who you are. There's a bit of a generational divide happening actually there, as we've explored, Michael, in previous work. But I do think when it comes to things like real estate, you already have concepts around this. Even when you think about just generally ETFs, when you think about just index funds, you're kind of owning, in a way, if you want to think about it, you're owning a broader portfolio of assets that come together to create kind of one broader, more risk allocated return. You can kind of do that. You can imagine how you could do that with fractionalized ownership of different kinds of things, whether it's real estate, whether it's a piece of a luxury vehicle, whether it's whatever it might be. There are all kinds of new models we've yet to even tap. What I think is going to be really interesting is to see how governments really take this and run with it, and the extent to which governments can create, to the minister's point, some of these new funding mechanisms, more room for collective action, and of course, if there's a way of embedding voting rights into some of this ownership. That's something an NFT could also, the kind of model paves the way for that kind of opportunity. So if you, as an owner of something, as a part owner of something, actually have some voice in what is done with that thing, that is really powerful, as opposed to the more traditional, really passive kind of holdings that a lot of people have to engage in because they don't have the net worth really to play in a bigger way. So all these things, I think, are going to lead to a very profound change in the ways we think about investments in particular, but also in the ways we think of ownership.
So I'm going to add another word in there. I think it also speaks to governance, because what you're talking about when you talk about ownership and participation is the participation of that token holder in the governance of how those tokens are applying to the real world assets and economic resource allocation decisions that are associated with it, which is, again, a key part of the theme of this conference. And it actually is a good segue back to you, Minister Abdullah, because there's potentially a clash here, and we've already seen that it is the case, where you have the old world of governance being one that is set around, a pre-token economy, if you like, with existing regulations with regards to how exchanges work and the roles of custodians and all of these sort of deeply embedded laws that are applied to our financial sector in particular. And now there's this whole new idea that is much more fluid with fractional ownership and sort of participation and governance tokens and everything else it's very, very different. This must be challenging. I mean, how do you translate that world into the existing world? What is the approach that you're taking to the regulatory challenge to create something that is, on the one hand, protecting of the system as it needs to be, and of people's rights and all of the other roles that a government plays, but at the other hand, enables the innovation that we're talking about here? Break that down for us, please.
Michael, we are in government. We are good at regulation, and we might sometimes over-regulate. But in the tokenization challenges, I think we have a gap in two folds. One, we have a lack of harmonized regulation and lack of adequate regulation. And these are two major challenges in this area. Lack of harmonized regulation across jurisdiction could undermine the interoperability of the technology. And such regulation can vary significantly from one jurisdiction to another. This could be a limiting factor to both tokens creation and trading. Therefore, we need a more harmonized regulation between jurisdictions for this interoperability of this technology to happen. The other challenge we have as government as well, where we are expert in regulation, but we have lack of adequate regulation in this manner. And I mean the word adequate, which is very important. And this could be potential consumer protection concerns that could affect end users, investors, and broader economy, which government needs to protect as well and support. For instance, what kind of governance structure they will rely on. For instance, while investing in fine arts, if painting is divided into multiple tokens and is owned by more than one investor who acquires a painting, and what happens if the painting gets stolen? Or if we consider an apartment unit which is divided into multiple tokens, there's a little incentives for the owners of the tokens to pay the cost of the apartment maintenance and rent collection. Therefore, there are some potential gaps and challenges in these areas. But with that said, I think the initiative in collaboration between the Dubai Future Foundation, the Center for the Fourth IR, targeting the previously mentioned challenges, a pilot around asset tokenization, which we publicly announced during the session of implementing stakeholder capitalism in the Middle East and North Africa, the Davos Agenda 2021, has a double endeavor to tackle the financing challenge faced by SMEs and to provide more standardized and accessible approach to funding, allowing companies to reach a wider range of investors. We also took measures under the umbrella of the Securities and Commodities Authority, the jurisdiction that actually put the regulation in place to allow for the regulation of the issuance of digital assets, tokenization of financial instruments and commodities, and the regulating licensing of financial activities related to crypto assets, namely exchanges, crowdfunding platforms, and other financial activities. Therefore, yes, we understand the challenges and such, but as well, we are experimenting, allowing the UAE to be a test bed, a lab for experimenting such future-driven technology and allowing it to be implemented on the grounds here in the UAE.
Okay, we've got a question come in here, and I think it's appropriate that I pick it up now because it is relevant to this idea of the regulatory challenge. And in fact, I would put it to maybe to you, Sheila, just because I think you've got that, again, the sort of broad international take on the governance challenges. And this question says, current stock exchanges are country-based with implications for governance and taxation, but NFT exchanges are decentralized, peer-to-peer, yet affiliated by the organizations that built them. What do you see as the greatest opportunities and risks from this new alignment? I would say maybe misalignment as well as actually the challenge here.
Where to begin? Well, first I would argue that I think that's by design. It's deliberate and by design that these are decentralized and they're built on the top of decentralized protocol that isn't really owned by any jurisdiction or controlled by any jurisdiction. And they are truly global in this way, or at a minimum transnational. I actually am going to bring up a probably more mundane point, one I think is really relevant, which I think is the challenge of taxation around this. There's going to be a huge industry that emerges, and there already is, around crypto in general, NFTs. When we kind of move past the froth and get to some of the more robust challenge, robust opportunities that are going to be a little more sticky, I think that we're going to see a lot of wealth created in this space if we aren't already. And so then there comes the question of how do governments actually engage with that? The regulation of crypto is a general matter, right? Apart from outright bans on owning it. And what that does is it pushes really the ownership and the holdings to different jurisdiction. So is that the answer? Every jurisdiction has to decide for itself. And some are taking very different stances. I'm just going back to the crypto example, you'll see, what India is doing, what China is doing, what the US is doing, very different approaches in Europe. So I think that everyone has to decide for themselves the extent to which they are going to seek to really try to control this as much as that's even possible, again, with the general reminder that it's not really possible. But one thing governments can do, certainly, and have historically done, is at least get some benefit, if you will, in the ability to provide services based on a taxation path. And if that in and of itself becomes even more complicated, I think then we're going to see a lot of pushback from governments. If they realize that there isn't any capture that can be done of some of that capital gain or whatever you want to call it. I also think we need new methods of thinking about securities laws and how we're thinking about, accredited investment. I think a lot about consumer protection laws. Who is the consumer? Who are we protecting? When it comes to NFTs, there's the creator, there is the owner, there's, to Minister's point, the fractional owner who's incentivized differently from the actual owner of the underlying asset. The NFT owner has different incentives than the underlying asset owner. How do you reconcile those? There's a role for government to play that I think is very important, but it all depends at a threshold point of a government embracing this innovation and saying we want to be part of working together with the creators, with the ecosystem to start shaping this in a way that can be beneficial for all of society.
Great. So another question's coming. I'm just going to pick up now because it's sort of it's a segue to you, Harry, and it's one that it's Sheila. You recognize the two of the big things we've been talking about in our podcast have been this challenges in regulation and decentralization. Another is energy, is some the concerns that people are raising around, if you like, the carbon footprint of not just NFTs and tokens, but also the broader industry of crypto. And artists, I think, perhaps seemingly to me at least, seem more energized about this issue than perhaps others. Harry, what are you saying to them when they come and say, "Hey, but this NFT that I'm minting is going to, destroy a chunk of the Amazon's rainforest or something"? Is it a real concern? And if not, why not? If it is, what is the way to lead to a greener world, a greener tokenizing world? I think
the answer is that it is a concern. It's a concern for everyone. And the reason artists are talking about it is because it's our job. And I think governments, economists, experts across the board should be looking to artists for those insights, because if you actually look at the history of crypto art, you've probably got answers or some very interesting questions to those big problems. And it's as much our job to engage. And as I said before, it applies to all emerging technology, is that when you have an artist come in, make that provoke, explore the technology, it's there to bring those questions to panels like this, to spaces like this, because we are making the noise and we're asking those questions. And currently the Ethereum blockchain, where much of the NFT sort of artworks are being put on chain, everybody knows that this is not as efficient as it could be. But that is not the only chain. That is not the kind of defined future of this technology. There are other things happening. So it's my job to make artworks that kick up those discussions. And I think as long as artists are really talking about this, they're able to be self-aware, they're conscious, and the artwork extends before just making art, then I think that's a very, very powerful and good thing. So we're here to kick up the noise to the experts, and that's a very practical thing. And just want to say that the artist's role in that can be quantified. It is practical, it's tangible, and it's very, very important. So we are here for you to learn from.
And if I might add to that, Harry's actually created for the forum a piece of art called Voice Gems. And so there is actually an interactive NFT experience for registered participants. So those attending the summit as registered participants can actually collect a souvenir that was created by Harry and mint an NFT. And one thing I want to note is that to address the environmental implications there, that's all done on a side chain. So we're not actually minting off of and leveraging the Ethereum block. We're doing that very infrequently in order to minimize the environmental footprint of this and using sidechains. So some of this, I think, there are, in response to some of the concerns that have arisen from the broader community, a lot of the ecosystem has been focusing on ways to minimize carbon footprints, but also to minimize energy consumption. And that's true at the protocol layer. We know that Ethereum has already begun very much the process to scale down energy consumption. And to Harry's point, there are many chains that are focused specifically on the idea of the same optionality, the same programmability, all the same kind of features and characteristics, but without the same environmental footprint. So, I think those who really follow this space, so this has been a conversation for a very long time. I think it's interesting. I take Harry's point. I think it's 100% absolutely the case of artists in particular to be flagging some of these concerns, but they are tapping into an awareness that has been building ever since, the initial Bitcoin white paper was frankly conceived. So ongoing work.
Yeah, just to add, I think it's a very important point, is the beauty of these technologies. We have to kind of see beyond and understand that these systems, different manifestations of these technologies, the long-term goals, where these things can go, it's very important to speculate. And the project that Sheila mentioned, we're actually interested in putting endangered species voices on the blockchain, dying languages on the blockchain, using voice gems to symbolically represent that. But the blockchain is a medium of permanence, and there's something very powerful about that. So we have to look ahead as much as be very conscious about the present.
Yeah, I thoroughly recommend people take a look at those voice gems. Really, really cool looking art and the concept. And also, I think for Sheila to raise the idea of a sidechain solution, it's a little bit of homework for people to do right now to understand, what that is and why it matters that there is not every transaction being processed in a blockchain, which does entail all of that computation, and understanding how these layers and different structures work within the system. So lots and lots of interesting innovation happening, not only around NFTs, but also in how to solve these energy and computational challenges. Actually, to the Minister Abdullah, I'm just wondering, obviously the UAE has an interest in energy, traditionally a big hydrocarbons producer, but also a lot of sun and a lot of interest in renewables as well. Do you see, interplay between, the token economy, some of these issues we've been talking about, and what your role as a government is in driving energy policy as it pertains to tokens?
Of course, indeed, we're looking at, we have a huge infrastructure in renewable energy. I think one of the tokenizations of assets could really happen on that, where assets of such can actually be played on exchanges and could be tokenized, where actually people can fraction tokenize these current assets of renewable energies. This is one of the cases actually I'm trying to put forward for government to really use the tokenizations of assets on such, on infrastructure, on power plants, on solar energy, on things that we can actually test and use in the UAE as something that we can state as a government owned infrastructure, and that can be tokenized. So yes, it is being interplayed, and it's actually being put forward as a policy of testing it here in the UAE.
Interesting, because just as you were speaking, a question has just come in that seems to speak exactly to that. Somebody asked the question, EV, electric vehicle infrastructure, is cost heavy. Do you see the adoption could be accelerated if batteries and infrastructure were fractionally owned? That seems to dovetail with what you were saying, right? Is that a use case you see, the EV world?
Absolutely. Here in the UAE, we're very open. We're looking at ideas such as that. We're looking for ideas that are very disruptive to tokenize assets that could be capital heavy and could be fractionally owned. And this is something where we can look at how can government really use this, and how can government really play it in a favor and opportunity, actually, than actually tackling it down or over-regulating it and taking the technology and another swift. So we're in the UAE, we're very, very careful and very sensitive on how do we deal with future technologies and how we test these things out. But absolutely, we are really looking into the technology and the use of assets, especially in renewables, and what's not.
Great. So Harry, maybe if you can just sort of talk us through some of the many wild ideas that are spinning through the heads of people like you on what we could do now with this technology. Like, what is it? How do we take all of these ideas, fractional ownership and the like, and apply it to a way that not only energizes the economy, but I suppose leads to a greater distribution of participation in it, given that we kind of live in an economy that is driven by creators anyway. everybody in some respect is a creator these days. How does this feed into, broad-based participation, specifically with regards to NFTs and digital media?
Yeah, again, I can't speak for the entire creative world, but there's definitely some really exciting aspects. Just specifically to my work, I mentioned this idea of it being a medium of permanence. What you're seeing across the board is innovation. Like, people are finding brand new ways to explore value, brand new ways to collect collectors and creators and all the mediums in between. But I'm very interested in how the general public can use tokenization of a way of acknowledging value in a brand new way. And for example, things like recycling, you're able to create products that are able to be tokenized. And what happens is you're able to now have a logbook for that tokenized product. So the lifespan of that for the foreseeable future is able to be understood and tracked. And that creates an incredible consciousness to all of the possessions that you own. Everything that you buy can now be tokenized. And we all know, if you are to purchase a vehicle, if that vehicle does not have a logbook, you don't know where it's been, who's owned it, it absolutely changes the value. So these new ways of perceiving the world around us, being able to actually acknowledge like what we own, how we own it, where it's going, and the capacity for smart contracts to be so creative with those transactions. It's nothing but exciting, but what we have to do is make these things tangible. And I think it's examples like that, opportunity for new business owners, opportunity for new artists, the empowerment of it, the narratives, all the way up to the most sort of large scale implementations. This all relies on narrative and making these things demystified and accessible.
Great. Well, Sheila, actually, there's another question that's come in here that I think is relevant to the broader theme that I was hoping you would touch upon anyway, and that is, not just what role governments play, but how do we perceive what the almost international governance model should be? Somebody's asking, do you see the role of private, I suppose, the private sector as a driver to help the state on regulation? So looking at tokenization and the governance challenges that lie around it, what does the structure look like between, the role of private communities, the role of NGOs, the role of decentralized communities, which is a lot of what the token protocols are all driven by, and then governments as well, in sort of establishing the right regime for tokens generally?
Well, it's a complicated question, but I would say that certainly at the forum, we hold strong to the concept that multi-stakeholder collaboration is the way forward. It's the best way forward. And particularly, I think it's never more true than in a space that is actually decentralized, because without participation from a variety of perspectives and a variety of sectors, a variety of geographies, on something that fundamentally is, again, an a-jurisdictional concept. It's a global innovation, right? In that it doesn't belong to any particular country or sector. It's really truly the way you think about the internet. It really is just that profound in terms of the way that this technology is revolutionizing a lot of our systems. And so I think that there's a role for all of these groups to play. And what I think is most important is, and I'm very proud of the work that we're doing here at the forum on bringing together and convening communities that represent this diversity of perspectives. Where I think this can go awry is actually where we see it sort of starting to break down a bit is where there is a lot of capture, whether that's capture by one sector, one country, or one demographic, quite frankly. And there's a lot of discussion. We talk a lot about the E and ESG when it comes to crypto, when it comes to NFTs, we talk a lot about the environmental implications, but I think the social implications are equally profound. There's a real movement around more diverse voices in this space, more diverse representation, both in the coding community, but also in the policy community, and in who's driving the governance models that underlie a lot of these protocols. So I would say there is a role for everyone. That sounds sort of optimistic and naive, but I really believe that this entire system is set up in such a way that participation by all these different participants is not just possible, but also very important.
Great. So to you again, Minister, another question came in about real estate. It is that, after all, we put that in the title of this session. So, and maybe also to sort of pick up on a little bit what Sheila was saying, broad-based participation, right? The idea of fractionalizing real estate. Real estate has been traditionally something that certainly expensive real estate has been in the hands of the wealthy. Do we have an opportunity through tokens and fractionalization to, I suppose, democratize the real estate market? And what are the specific real estate use cases that the UAE is looking at?
Michael, I think the most important part of fractionalization of such and looking at, there's no complete market for ideas, as ownership of an idea is either individualistic or bureaucratic process. And I think what tokenization is going to bring is a brilliant monetizing example, such as now we see it on art and we see it on other abstracts of properties. And this is something which is very, very important. How do we understand this? In the ministry, we understand this as our on the economic system, standing on the shoulders of giants. It is a revolutionary idea that have resulted in unprecedented economic growth from which humanity still benefits over this day. So this is the most important looking at it is in ways what fractionalization of assets and intellectual property for everyone, not just the investors, the high capital people. It's important as well to look how you can fractionalize it to the lower. Everyone can really benefit out of this. So this is where we're looking at a more for an economic system, more for ownership on different collective level. For high value assets. And this is something which has an opportunity for everyone, allowing individuals has more access to owning things. And the creativity can come out of this is immense. And I think starting with the art, I think this is something which we have today as an example, and it can go through, assets, can go through, like we just mentioned very recently on the sustainability, on the renewable energies. It can keep on going on many, many ideas. But in the end of it, we need to understand how can we put it in ways that we have an ecosystem that protects, that allow for growth, and that allow for experimentation as well.
Okay, great. I want to segue a little bit to back to something you were talking about, Harry, and you talked about some of the applications with, taking voices, taking ideas that need to be given some permanence and applying that to a blockchain environment. And maybe just for an audience who doesn't fully understand, not is familiar with this technology, you can help explain, like, why is immutability, this idea that, this asset, this particular reference entry point into a blockchain cannot be changed. Why is that a big deal? Why actually is it important from the artist's perspective, but also from the broader interest of society?
The art world has attempted provable scarcity for a very long time. This idea that you're able to have an artwork that exists, maybe with that comes a certificate of authentication. But what the metaverse offers is this opportunity to have a tokenized artwork that is traceable either through metadata, and the system allows for that to exist through many, many transactions over time. So what you have now is NFT standards, and artists are able to use those standards to be creative. It's a huge, huge opportunity to have something that is objective. And that's very powerful for artists, this idea of provable scarcity. So with my work specifically, being able to put artworks on the chain, we had concerns about the environment and the energy usage. But actually, there is many opportunities artistically to question that and challenge that. And there's many things on Earth that are extremely vulnerable. And the use of immutability to be able to make sure these things are protected and those standards are being used to protect these things, acknowledge these things, I think is a really, really exciting space. And in many ways, the digital is becoming more real every day. And some people might find that strange, they might find that challenging, but it's a fact. And that system allows for a very powerful example of that. And as an artist, I want to use that and provoke that, and also protect many vulnerable sort of special things that we cherish in the physical world.
Sheila, let's go a bit deeper into this idea of the things that need to be protected, because after all, the thing that most needs protecting perhaps is the planet itself. And there's a question that's come in. I might reframe it a little bit. That you and I have talked quite a bit about. And the way that this question is phrased is: do you think blockchain technology needs to follow environment standards of Paris protocols? I suppose I would answer that by saying everything needs to essentially follow the goal of getting us down to zero carbon emissions in the future. But ultimately, I suppose the question I would frame is, how do we work with, to go back to what we were talking a little about before, how do we work into the governance of blockchains and the role that regulators and others play, some sort of structure that does drive it toward the kind of things that Harry was talking about, the efficiencies and the protection of the planet, and ultimately, arresting climate change.
Yeah, well, let me start off by being a little cynical here.
All the time. Sorry.
Sorry, say again?
I'm just saying, I'm asking you the biggest, widest question.
Yeah, you certainly aren't throwing me any narrow questions here, Michael. No worries. But I think, on this one, I'll start off by being a little bit cynical, which is to say, I think we've observed over the past decade that just relying on people's altruism or broader awareness of environmental challenges is not getting us where we need to be. I think we can just acknowledge that as a sad but provable fact. And so it really is about shaping the path. And so making certain kinds of actions impossible, like literally impossible. And so I think this is kind of what you're seeing with some of the efforts at the protocol layer and in the code base to make things more energy efficient. So a classic example, I think that's being talked about a lot right now is ETH to ETH2, where you're getting a much more energy efficient method essentially for using the Ethereum blockchain. So that there's examples where you just make it, you just take it out, you just remove the problem. There's also the opportunity to create incentives for correct behavior, right? And so you see this with things like net zero, carbon neutral, just kind of standards and things that are coming along. And whether that's punitive measures where you're penalized or fined if you exceed a certain amount of emissions or these kinds of things, or whether it's there's some sort of incentive, there's a carrot for acting in the right way. I think these are things that are possible to bake into governance. It is possible to actually provide, let's talk about, voting power, more voting power to those who are acting in a environmentally friendly way versus those who aren't, right? There's all kinds of mechanisms you can build into any kind of governance model, even beyond crypto, that will incentivize correct behavior. And so I think we have to decide what is the opportunity, what are the places that the blockchain ecosystem really needs to play a very strong role. Where can we achieve kind of the consensus that we need to get some of those incentives baked into the governance? And then how do we go about doing that? So it's something that the forum is beginning to really explore, again, with our typical multi-stakeholder coalition of practitioners, because we do think that this is something that requires, to the earlier questioner, this is a classic example, something that really requires every sector participation. You can't have just governments, enacting regulation, as we've seen, like that. You see private sector actors finding ways to get around that. You can't have just the private sector moving on this without support from the consumer base or from others in the community. So it's really important that we truly have a broad variety of actors participating in this collaboration to move us, hopefully, very quickly and profoundly towards a better environmental situation.
Great. So look, we've got 2 minutes left to wrap this up. So I think we just have to be quick here. But to the minister, maybe you could just close us out here, because I think I'll pick up what Sheila was just saying. It has to be everybody involved in this process of figuring out what the governance is. So from the government's perspective, when you're taking your approach, what are you doing with other governments? What is your approach to this, and how do we internationalize, if you like, standards for regulation with other governments?
Well, in the UAE, we welcome and encourage everyone, neighbors and every regional government, to join us in this endeavor of scaling blockchain and crypto assets within the region. And I think if the UAE has always been in the region a leading nation which actually take future technology into aspects, we have a lot of experiences we've done for the emerging technologies, such as the private sector as well, have adopted a lot of and demonstrated a lot of examples in the Bitcoin, such as the rise of BitOasis, a UAE-based large crypto exchange platform, the MENA. As well, the UAE, we can help scale the use of digital assets by harboring crypto assets in the nationwide regulated crypto exchange. So we are very welcoming in the region to really play together with other governments and explain how can we bring this together in many ways. And I think this is something which is very important. I just want to add a little bit point on Sheila on the aspect. I think the actors as well should come as well from large corporations as well into this. We, as government or private sector, SMEs, large corporations, maybe as well venture capitalists or private equity, and really come together to really push this future technology further. I think this is something which everyone has to play a role. I agree, and I think we need to identify all the actors in the ecosystem and really define the biggest role that we can really play together. As government to government, we're very welcoming to do that, and this is something which we take further in our use.
I think that's an ideal place to wrap this up. A call to action for everybody, multiple governments, multiple stakeholders come together and come up with a cohesive approach to all this. So thank you very, very much to the panel, Minister Abdullah bin Tuq Al-Mari from the United Arab Emirates, Harry Yeff from Reaps 100 Studios, and to my good friend and podcast co-host, head of the blockchain data policy at the World Economic Forum, Sheila Warren. Thank you very much for this, everybody. And thank you all of you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the conference. There's much more to go. And check out those NFT artworks from Harry. They're really, really spectacular. And check out CoinDesk as well. We cover this sort of stuff all the time. Thank you very much for your time.